All right, everybody. Good morning. Another beautiful Tuesday here at Tallarico Group headquarters. And we have a very special episode of Breakfast with Bill for you today because I'm not here with just Bill and Matt like I usually am. We got a special guest on the show, Mr. Ron Gevaudan. Boys, how are we doing this morning?
Hey, good morning, Evan. Thanks for being with us, and thank you everyone who's out there with us as always. As Evan said, Matt Rogers is not with us today, my normal co-pilot. Matt, our partner, is fighting a little bit of gallbladder issue, and Matt's going to probably be having surgery today. So for those of you watching, please keep Matt in your prayers, and we hope to have Matt back quickly. We're not sure how long that'll be, but sure would love to see him next week again, huh? Joining us today is our other partner, Ron Gevaudan. Ron, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for having me today, and thank you for telling me yesterday that I was going to be on the show today. And I say that seriously because if you told me last Friday, I would have lost 4 days of sleep instead of only 1 day of sleep. So I appreciate you having me on.
Me and Matt show up usually at about 7:30 and say, "Hey, what do you want to open with?" And Ron was hitting me with, "Can we rehearse?" So it's good to be here. And Matt, again, we wish you well, and I'm sure everybody will be praying for you, and we look forward to getting you back. Ron runs our talent acquisition practice unit here at the Tallarico Group, and Ron spends most of his day searching for great talent for our clients, and I'd say the vast majority of that, probably 80 to 90% of that time, is spent on looking for sales candidates, which you've been doing a lot of here lately, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it takes a good chunk of our days, day in and day out, to find top talent out there. It's not easy, and I'm sure you'll get into why that's the case.
Now. Yeah.
We do the best we can, and sometimes it's good enough, but it's never a perfect process.
So, and the reason for that is because salespeople make a career getting people to like them 1 hour at a time. And we're going to talk a little bit today about how we hire great salespeople. But as we go through that for all of our salespeople watching, what are those traits that make you great? So when we're talking about some of the traits we look for as we hire great salespeople, there's some reflection that I'd like you to do if you're a salesperson watching this that says, do I do that? Right? And how do I let this impact me? And one of the things that separates us from the rest of the world, I think, when we're hiring salespeople is some of the tools we use. And I think the most powerful tool we use is our Objective Management Group assessments. Objective Management Group is a partner of ours based out of Boston who specializes solely in evaluating and assessing salespeople. And we use their assessments on the front end of our hiring process. And we actually get an assessment, if you want to pull that up, get an assessment back from every candidate that takes it that tells us whether or not this person is recommended or not recommended. And it's important to note that the recommendation is not for whether you should hire this individual, but for whether or not you should interview them. And Ron, how powerful do you think that predictive nature is with the recommended versus not recommended in your work?
In our experience, very much so. There are so many things you want to get out even before you spend time with that individual. We spend all the right time with all the wrong people, more times than not. And this specific assessment helps us with just that. As a matter of fact, as you know, it builds out, or not builds out, but it kicks out roughly 70% of the people that we interview as being somebody that we should not be spending our time with.
Yeah, the assessments, I think it's been pretty steady over 32 years and 2 million salespeople, that 75% of those people who are not recommended, right, who are not recommended for an interview, yet somehow hired, and we could talk about why that happens, fail inside of 6 months. So 75% of those people who are not recommended fail inside of 6 months. 93% of those who are recommended will be in the top half of your sales force after 1 year. So you ask, how does somebody who's not recommended for an interview end up getting hired? And we find it's because people put the assessments oftentimes at the wrong part of the process. So if we start interviewing a candidate and then we introduce assessments, right, we might have already fallen in love with that candidate. So now we're rationalizing why I should hire them, even though all the data says I shouldn't. And one of the things, a couple of the findings we really like when we look at the assessment that become very powerful. And the first is need for approval. right? So in so many assessments that are out there, they're behavioral based. So they will look at an extrovert and say, oh, extroverts make great salespeople because they could go talk to anybody. That's not true. So as a salesperson, what's your need for approval? How high is your need for approval? And you see in the assessment here that we're looking at doesn't need approval. Evan, if you could maybe, I don't know if everybody can see if you hover over that, but for doesn't need approval, right under sales DNA competencies, it's an inverse reading. So the higher that number, the better and stronger this individual is at standing on their own. And in this case, our candidate was a 75. So, excuse me, when you think about what that means, right? So let's talk about what that means, doesn't need approval versus being an introvert or an extrovert. And what we find is people who have a high need for approval are more worried about making friends and making connections than they are about making deals. So when we have salespeople that are out there in the world and they're coming back, it sounds a little something like this when they say, hey, boss, we had a great meeting. Yeah? What made it great? They love us. Yeah?
Yeah.
Do they have a need for anything? Well, I don't know, but they love us. I'm going to go back and talk to them next week, maybe, right?
Sounds perfect. And it happens all the time. It happens actually more time than it doesn't, especially with young sellers out there. Go into a meeting, they love me. What did they love?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. But they told me I could call back anytime. Great. But do they have a need for anything? No. Okay. So if I have a high need for approval, that might be what my sales conversations sound like. As a salesperson out there, how often do you find yourself saying that, right? How do you feel when somebody says no? And how well do we take that, the business relationship? How easily do we move into the business conversation that says, well, it's great if they like me, but it's much more important if they need us. And it's much more important if they trust us. And too often, we can't screen for that in an interview, right? So we find a lot of our clients, when we just had a situation yesterday where Ron and I were talking to a new potential client who needs help hiring a salesperson. And they were telling us about someone who failed. And when I said, why'd you hire that person? Shockingly, they said, well, we liked them, right? Yeah, we liked them, but we thought other people would like them too. It's always the case. We always hire a salesperson because we like them and we think other people are going to like them too.
And, one of the things that we'd love to figure out is, are you going to be able to ask tough questions? Are you going to be able to push back? And what's the salesperson going to say in an interview setting?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
I drive for results.
I can do that. But these are the things we're looking for. And again, if we knew that going into the relationship, obviously this is a person that we may not want to be spending time with moving forward. But again, it's the mistake after mistake that most of us make, out there in the recruiting world.
So if you're a salesperson, are you asking questions that advance relationships, or are you asking superficial questions? Are you happy to engage in a conversation with somebody just because they're engaged with you, right? Or is that good enough, having that conversation? And do you rationalize that by saying, well, I'm building the relationship, right? If that is something you ask yourself, then the follow-up, or that you tell yourself, then the follow-up has to be building the relationship for what? Because I remember when I was a young salesperson, I was very comfortable going into meetings, leaving after having identified all this connectedness. They went to the same high school, from the same neighborhood, know the same people, right? All those things, but I didn't advance sales cycles. And as a result, I didn't achieve all I could have achieved. So if you find yourself in that rationalization box, what are you going to do to get out of it? The other finding we love inside of the OMG report is buy cycle. So one of the things we're able to measure that most people aren't is buy cycle. And what we've learned, supportive buy cycle. And in this case, this person's supportive buy cycle is a 14, right? And this is an example or a sample assessment. Nobody in particular. So with supportive buy cycle, what that means is we've learned over the years that we buy like we sell, or we sell like we buy, right? So if I'm a cheap person and I'm a comparative shopper.
Stop looking at me, Bill.
if I'm a comparative shopper, I'm going to be very empathetic to those that are, right? And it's funny because Ron's supportive bicycle is relatively low.
No doubt. Yep.
Mine's very high. So when we go through the assessment and say, if you're making a major purchase other than a home or a car, how many stores will you visit? You look for the answer that says, how many are there, right? Or can I go to 12?
Is there a limit?
Yeah. Did I visit every one of them? Because you want to make sure you're getting the best price. With me, I'm just like, do I have to go to a store or can I just call somebody? Mm-hmm. And, I've joked in the past on this show about I haven't bought an appliance in person and I don't know, probably 10 years because I hate the process. And I have someone I trust, Maria Sherman at Dawn's Appliances, and I call Maria and she sends me what we need. And for me, I have no empathy for somebody that wants to go through an RFP, like none. You probably do.
I understand it, right? Because that's how I go out and purchase. But knowing that, obviously, as a seller and someone that's been selling for 20 years, I'll leave it at that. That knowledge is power, right? And to be able to understand that and to be able to now go out and ensure that I am aware of that and can respond to it appropriately is going to be what's key for my success going forward. So,
and understanding when you're falling into too much empathy.
Yeah, no doubt. And kind of going back to some of the statistics of the report, and as we know, OMG has put through over 2 million people through this assessment, and only 38% of the folks who have been assessed have what we would consider a supportive bicycle. So most of the folks actually fall into my camp that are a little weak when it comes to that bicycle. So we have to
we like to refer to that as empathy. Have too high of empathy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And what is the number though, Ron, with people who are in the top 10% of salespeople? Because the numbers change.
It does change. The top 10% is still only 56%. So 56% of those 2 million that have been assessed plus have a supportive bicycle. So that's still relatively low.
Yeah. But it's interesting, the gap between the underperformers and the top tier performers. So of the top tier performers, 56% of them have supportive bicycle. With all people, with the sales force as a whole, it's 38. So top performers are, what was that, 50% roughly better with supportive bicycle, right? Roughly 50% better. So for you, what is your bicycle? Are you somebody that likes to shop around, and as a result, when somebody says, hey, we're going to have an RFP and you're included, does that make you happy? All right. And I know for those of you who might be in RFP intensive industries, you're probably thinking, but I need the RFP. I have to go to an RFP. If you're selling to public schools, if you're selling to governments of any kind, I get it. Absolutely. That it's out there and you need to. But let's be mindful. Let's be very mindful of how we're influencing that RFP process, and if we're just going along with it versus trying to influence it. And in industries that don't demand an RFP, are you accepting RFPs? Are you accepting people putting you into competitive selling situations when you don't need to be? How do you respond to that? Are you excited and just say, great, when can I expect your RFP? Or do you ask questions that challenge the buyer? Such as, well, sure, I understand you have to do that, but what have I failed to demonstrate to you to earn your trust that you might be looking forward to learning in an RFP? Or what are you hoping to learn in an RFP that I've somehow failed to demonstrate to you in our conversations? Because somebody might not know why they're going into RFP. They just think they have to do it, right? Just because they need 3 bids.
It's part of the process.
Yeah, just because it puts in, and by the way, the process Ron just referred to is really putting themselves at ease, right? That's the process, is people need to feel like they're not being taken advantage of. And if somebody says, well, I need 3 bids, are you comfortable asking, what are you going to do when one bid comes in real low? What if somebody's price is 25% below mine? What would you do? Right? And making them think, because we want to plant that fear, uncertainty, and doubt in people. That if you have somebody that's 25% below me, I don't know how they're doing it, but you have to question what you're going to receive.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. So, and we actually had that happen with a client of ours probably 2 years ago, where a bid came in so far below theirs they challenged the buyer, and they said, we know how you get to these numbers, and I can tell you, for somebody to be 25% below us, they're not going to be able to give you the service you demand and you require. We find that that'll probably manifest and be visible after 90 days. So we can't match their price. But what I am going to ask of you is if we could meet in 90 days to see how they're doing. They set a clear next step for 90 days down the road. That our client came back and met with the prospect. And at that point, the prospect said, I'm so glad you said this. I'm so glad you're here. The service has been horrible. We want to go with you guys. When can you start? And they won the business at their price, which was 25% above the lowest price the buyer had. But the buyer realized that even though they went with low price, they weren't getting great quality. So they thought they were saving money, but they actually bought themselves a whole lot of frustration. So the questions we have for you as salespeople: what is your empathy like, right? How much are you driven by understanding the buy process of someone else, even if they don't, right? Because oftentimes when people are telling us they need to do things in their buying process, they don't understand why they need to do them. It's just part of what they think they need to do, right? And
how are we responding?
Yeah.
Are we okay with it because that's how we think, that's what we do, or can we stay in the moment? Can we stay in the moment and ask those critical questions? Where is the hesitation coming from? And it's typically one of three things. It could be me, it could be money, it could be the merchandise, right? It could be any of those things. But that's where we have to stay in the moment, stop, discuss, and think about, how do I get this to the next level?
Mm-hmm. And if you're hiring salespeople, how are you assessing for that now? And what do you think of that? Like, do you see the challenge it could present in elongating the sales cycles for your company, and introducing competition to opportunities where we should be blocking out the competition? So as a sales manager, sales leader, business owner, how are you assessing for that today, and how are you managing for that? As a salesperson, how do you let that impact you, right? How do you let that get into your psyche? How do you let your approach to buying influence your approach to selling? Because oftentimes those of us who are empathetic with buyers because we do it that way get frustrated that they're doing it that way, yet understand that we're doing it that way, right? For me, I don't have empathy for that. I can't. So when people ask us to participate in RFPs, I graciously thank them. I say, well, I certainly appreciate that. But if we're going to an RFP, then I've grossly failed to demonstrate our value to you. So we'll help you write it and help you find somebody that might be more fitting for you, but I don't think we're going to be a good fit. And it's amazing how when we share that with somebody, the need for an RFP goes away, because our job is to help people understand how they're buying and help them understand a better way to buy, a better way forward. So ask yourself those questions, right? Cool. Well, today a little bit of a view on how we help, what do we need to do to find great salespeople to bring into our organization, and then as a salesperson, what are the things I need to be mindful of that might get in the way of me being great, right? Because if we can take that leap, a little bit from good to great, what's the power we have? And it's those incremental changes that have exponential impact. And if we understand ourselves better, and we can incrementally grow, we can have exponential impact on our business and on our lives. So think about your need for approval. Do you have a high need for approval? And if so, how does that get in the way of you driving business cycles or sales cycles forward? And then what's your buy cycle, right? Or do you like to do comparison shopping? And then as a result of that comparison shopping, do you become very empathetic to others who are trying to do comparison shopping? Think about that, how that impacts your results, and let us know how that impacts your week. As always, we love feedback. And our friend Evan, it becomes the clearinghouse of all questions and all requests. So if you would like to join our mailing list, if you would like to share and submit some questions with us about specific topics that you're dealing with in your sales life and in your business leadership life, please share those with us at Evan@Tellerico Group. That's Evan@Tellerico Group. And as always, please check out our YouTube channel. If you search Tellerico Group in YouTube, you can find that and see all of our past episodes of Breakfast with Bill and be made aware of when we go live. I think, Evan, we also are launching a new website, or we did this week. We have a new website that's about to go live, and Ron, you.
It is about to go live. The unofficial date is probably the start of next week, is my guess. But they might surprise us. The folks that push those buttons might push that out prior to the end of the week. So we're excited about that. So stay tuned.
How about that? I heard about it. I just haven't really participated that much.
You're on the front page, so you might want to be aware of when that goes out.
You might not want to visit the website then if that's the face you're greeted with. Check that out. I think we're on our new website. We're going to have an ability for you to direct link to our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to catch videos. Great. So as always, we really appreciate you being with us and appreciate the trust you put in us and the investment of time you put in us. Ron, thank you so much for being here and sharing some of your wisdom on talent acquisition with us this week.
I appreciate that, Bill. Excited to do it again one day, and happy to play second string to our quarterback, Matt Rogers, out there.
Yeah, Matt sent out an email or text this morning in our group about 6:30 that said, "I hope I'm not the Drew Bledsoe of Breakfast with Bill and Ron takes over and becomes Tom Brady." Huh? So
that was the only thing that gave me inspiration this morning. I said there was a gangly kid out of Michigan that decided when the starter went down, he came in, won the next 38 Super Bowls in a row.
Yeah.
And the rest was history. So maybe it's recess with Ron is what Steph gave me prior to the show. So I'm looking forward to that. But again, appreciate stepping in for Matt, and obviously wish him well.
Yeah, nobody's praying harder for Matt's recovery than Ron. So Matt, get well. And thank you, everybody, for being here. God bless you all. We'll see you next week.
Thank you all.